Hi, this is Bonnie, and today we're going to look at how to do a braided edge as a finish on our small tapestries. This is being recorded in conjunction with the OneTree Alaska Tempestry project, but you can use this technique on really any small tapestry and even on large ones. So the first thing that I did to get ready is I've cut my piece off the loom, and I have my last row of weft in here. And these warp ends are all curly because they've been tied around a rod. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me just show you my supplies first. I have a very fancy tapestry fork here, a pair of sharp scissors, a heavy book, I like Harry Potter, a cloth to go underneath my tapestry, and a little bowl of water. So I'm going to take my Harry Potter here and just put it on top of the tapestry. And that just serves to weight it down, so while I'm manipulating it, it doesn't slide around. The next thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of my water and wet the last row of weft on my tapestry and the tops of these warp threads. Wetting them is going to make them easier to manipulate, and it'll also make it possible for you to straighten them out. So we're going to wet these and then just pull on them a little bit to straighten them up, and then I'm just kind of combing them into place with the tapestry fork. And I'm holding as I'm pulling on these warp threads a little bit hard. This will also help the very bottom of your weft. You can see it separating there. It'll help you get this all nice and snug and back into place if you pull these warp threads down a little bit before you begin. And just use your fork to bring that bottom row of weaving into place, and we're ready to begin. The next thing you need to do is locate your tail. So my tail is on the right hand side here, nice bright red so it's easy to see. We want to start at the end opposite the tail. So if your tail's on your right, you're going to start on your left, and if your tail's on your left, you're going to start on your right. If you prefer to go one direction versus the other, all you do is unweave a row to move your tail to the other side. So I'm going to start with 3 threads, and this is a very simple braid, just like you would braid somebody's hair. You're going to take your working thread, which is always the one from the outside edge that you started on, in this case my left, go over its next door neighbor, under the one beyond that, and then just lay it down. And I do mean just lay it down. You don't want to pull them very tight. You just want a tiny little loop there. The water that you are using to wet these threads will help them stick together so you can avoid the temptation to pull too tight. If you pull it too tight, what'll happen is you get an edge that is tighter than your last few rows of weaving, and it'll distort your fabric. So let's slow down and do that again. I'm taking my working thread, which is the one on the outside edge that I started from. I go over the one next to it, under the next one beyond that. I hold these 2 threads while I pull this one up to give it tension against them that'll lay it down in the right place. You will find that your threads kind of get jumbled like this as you go along, so just make sure you're picking up the very next one. Like these 2 threads are crossed. I'm going to figure out which one is actually next on my warp and pull that one. I'm taking the working thread, go over, under, up. Pick up another one, take the working thread on the outside, go over, under, and up. Do that a couple more times. Got my 3 threads. I'm working with this one. I go over the next one, under the one, 2 down, and then up. Here's another place where I just have to stop for a second and make sure I am picking up the correct thread. And I go over, under, and up. Do one more, pick up a new one, over, under, and up. And we'll pause there. I'll continue working on this and come back. Okay, we're coming back now after I've finished most of the edge. I have 4 warp threads left and my tail. So again, I'm just keeping this nice and damp to make sure that those cotton warp threads snug right up against each other. Going over, under, and up. And now I've got 3 left. I'm going to go one more time, over, under, and up. And now you see this last one is laying right down the very edge of the tapestry. So we definitely don't want to go any farther than that. And we're running out of threads. So the next thing we're going to do is braid these last 2 warp threads and our tail together. You can tie a knot in them before you start braiding if you want, or you can just start braiding. It makes no difference in terms of how well this will hold if you do it one way versus the other. It just is a matter of kind of your aesthetics, if you will. If you do a knot, it gives a little bit more defined stop to that braided edge. And if you don't, it gives a little bit more smooth angle. If you are going to tack your braid to the back of the tapestry, I would recommend against a knot. And if you're going to leave it showing as a decorative element, it really doesn't matter. So I'm braiding these just like you braid hair, over, under, over, under. I'm taking the outside one and going over, under till it moves to the outside on the opposite side. And then when you get to the end of your warp thread, or when you feel like your braid is long enough, whichever comes first, just make a little slip knot in it and pull that through. Then, holding these so it doesn't come unbraided, I'm just taking that knot and using a pinching motion with my fingers to move it downward toward the edge. That'll both tighten the braid and help you get the most length out of that. Then snip off the ends and you have a beautiful little decorative braid on the side. So what this looks like is on the front of the tapestry, we have a very clean finish with no weft threads loose. It tightened those all up. On the edge, you've got that nice looped braided look, which is a very clean finish. And then on the back, you have these tails. So the last thing that you can do, and I'll show you, if you just left it like this, it would be secure enough to mount or frame or whatever you want to do. But you can also stitch down the edge, and I'll show you a couple of different ways that I did this. So on this one, if you see this little blue thread here, I used weft thread in the same color as the tapestry to just go over these little warp threads here and secure them tight. And that blue just blended in to all of the blues up in here. So that's one way to do it. Then when I finish, I put a little bit of glue, watered down glue on a brush, or use fray check or something similar. And then you can clip the edges. And this one has a little edge that isn't clipped, so I'll show you how close you can do it. Just sneak your scissors in there and snip those down nice and straight and pick them off. And there's the ones I snipped. So they're tied in way up here, and there's a little bit of fray check on there. And then the end will never go anywhere. On this one, I also secured the braid in. I didn't want the braid to show, so that's how you would do that. On this edge of the tapestry, I did a different treatment. This is sewn with just a really strong polyester sewing thread. This particular one is done by hand, and I stitched that around each warp thread. You can see it's a dark blue thread, and that just blended right into the dark blue along that edge of the tapestry. So those all got sewn in, and then when I'm ready, I can just snip them right off a little bit closer. Being careful, of course, that I don't catch any of the weft on my precious tapestry, so take that nice and slow. This particular edge, I did not use any glue or fray check. It really is just an extra security to do that, so your choice whether you do or not, but that's how clean and fine that edge can be. The final method that you could use to sew down your warp ends, and they will stay put even if you don't sew them down, they just get kind of loose on the back, is you can take your sewing machine and put the needle right in across these, going into that braid. And what that'll do is you'll have a really tiny line right along this edge, but it'll sink right behind that wool, so you never see it, and that's enough to secure it in if you go back and forth. And again, you're tying this right back into the braid, and it gets super secure. And again, when you're ready to just snip the extra ends off, you would just do them about that long. So that is a braided